Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Niblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Ginos, originator of the Zero G draft strategy. And in this podcast, I'm going to go over 10 mind boggling statistics I've come across in my review of the 2023-24 season. And I'm going to tell you what they mean for the upcoming fantasy season. Let's get it. All right, welcome in for another episode. In this one, it's just going to be me. It's going to be a shorter episode for sure. We're just going to go through 10 shocking statistics for fantasy hockey from last year. We're going to try to figure out what they might mean for next year. Some of them are a lot more involved, and some of them are a little bit more just for fun. But I figure in the midst of all the projection episodes that Blake and I have been releasing, pretty heavy stuff, pretty long episodes, it would be good to have this little shorter episode come out kind of in the midst of all that and kind of take a break from all of that and just kind of dig in on some fun numbers. If you're like me at all, if you vibe with the Apples and Ginos vibe at all, then you might also be a little bit into the numbers. So I think we might have something for you here. Let's not delay. Let's get into the very first shocking statistic, and that is that despite the pretty dismal results on the season, Jeff Skinner still ranked 18th in the league in individual scoring chances for per 60 at 11.6. Really strong numbers again from Jeff Skinner. This is what he does. He continually puts up these kind of elite level numbers, even in a season where nothing went right for the Sabres as a whole, but especially for Jeff Skinner. And he obviously ended up getting pushed down the lineup, ended up on the fourth line. They buy out his contract. It's a whole thing. But at the end of it all, you look back and you say, man, he's still ranked that highly in those numbers. For context, like some of the players that were around him, Jack Hughes right there. You got guys like Chris Kreider, those net front guys. You got Kirill Kaprizov in this range. You got Matthew Tkachuk in this range. You got Wyatt Johnston in this range. Lots of really, really big time names in this range. So, really good stuff from Jeff Skinner there. Obviously, now, new situation goes to Edmonton. The potential to play alongside Connor McDavid. Don't know if you've heard of him, but he's pretty good at hockey. Could be a really nice situation for Jeff Skinner. Probably not going to be any power play time there for Jeff Skinner, barring injury to the already established top unit there. But either way, Jeff Skinner will at the very least have significant fantasy relevance as a streamer, but potentially have even more than that if he can really lock down a role on the McDavid line. I do think it would make some sense for him to be able to do that. You've got Hyman on the other side, who's obviously like the forechecker grinder type. You got McDavid, who's going to obviously handle the puck the 95% of the time he's on the ice, it seems. But Skinner can definitely be that shooter that perhaps complements both of those players pretty well. And so that could be a good spot for a guy like Jeff Skinner, something that I'm pretty interested in terms of fantasy for this year. I'm not going to, just let the fact that Jeff Skinner does seem to have these problems. It's now been multiple stops where coaches have not enjoyed what appears to be his lack of defensive enthusiasm. But I do think that Jeff Skinner in a good spot with a line that's going to dominate no matter what, just because it has Connor McDavid on it. He could be a good fit on that top line, and as a result could have a really nice fantasy season. And you see it in the numbers. The numbers didn't really go away. It was definitely more so a bad situation overall in Buffalo, and then a bad situation between him and the coach and getting deprioritized down the lineup. And now you have a brand new situation for him, and it could be wheels up, and it could be a really good one for him at that. All right, statistic number 2. Dylan Guenther eclipsed both 16 minutes average time on ice at 16:16 and 10 individual scoring chances for per 60, 10.1 as a rookie this past season. These are really good numbers. This is what you want to see from a guy coming into the league. He played 45 games last year, so it's not a full season sample size by any stretch. I guess he wasn't technically a rookie last year. He did get into 33 games in 2022-23. So it wasn't technically a rookie by the book, but he's definitely playing very few minutes in those 33 games in 22-23. Last year, got a lot more run, got elevated up the lineup, and made good on it. Really, really strong numbers pretty much across the board there for Dylan Genther. Came out with 18 goals and 35 points in 45 games. Really strong pace. The IPP looks good. He's converting really well. Maybe had some unsustainable numbers, but he could also end up in a little bit better of a spot this year. You get Logan Cooley taking a step this year. Maybe they raise each other's games at even strength, and it ends up all working out for Dylan Genther to have a really big season here in 2024-25. Blake and I both super excited about this player. Got big projections on him. Feels a lot to me like how excited I was about Wyatt Johnston. You can go back and check out what I said about Wyatt Johnston at the start of last season, how I was saying, if there was somebody to elevate from the Dallas Stars, that I thought it would be Johnston. That came true, and it's because of a lot of these same numbers that I'm seeing from Genther. I actually think Genther has a stronger path to greater deployment than Johnston did early in his career in Dallas, and so Genther could actually not be as good of a player necessarily, as good of a natural talent as Johnston, but actually get more deployment and get deployment with better players faster and kind of reach the same sort of heights just by virtue of that. So definitely think that there's a lot of ways in which Dylan Genther can have a really, really strong season for fantasy. Like we're talking 30 plus goal potential here. We're talking 60, 65 plus point potential here. Definitely could be a very strong season for Dylan Genther. Obviously, small sample size, things definitely broke right for him last year, but I also think that they're kind of counting on him to be that guy moving forward. And so I don't see it regressing, at least in terms of the opportunity. Obviously, he's got to make good on that himself, the player. Statistic number 3. Nikolai Ehlers ranked 15th in the league in IPP at 77%. And that was the second lowest mark of his last 5 years. So across his last 5 seasons, his 77% IPP was the second lowest of those 5 years. And that was good enough for 15th in the league. Ehlers is just one of these guys who absolutely dominates all the puck touches and dominates his line every time he's on the ice. He's got the puck. He's the one making the offense go. Doesn't honestly even matter necessarily how good of line mates he's playing with. He is controlling the play. He's getting in on the offense that's being scored. And so this is the reason that I just can't quit Nikolai Ehlers. Is this the season where he gets top power play deployment and things just work out perfectly? Could it be that this finally happens? It's been such a long time coming. It feels like a fool's errand to believe. And definitely it doesn't appear like there's a spot on the top line for him. So you're looking at him playing with maybe like a Nemestikov and a Perfetti on a second line. That's not nearly as exciting, obviously, as playing with guys like Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Gabriel Velarde. Either way, I do think that you're looking at a player who, in the right situation, could absolutely pop off because he does dominate his share of the offense so much when he's on the ice. If he gets any more ice time, it's absolutely going to skyrocket his numbers more than a lot of other players just because of this ridiculously high IPP that he's sustained for so many years at this point. Yeah, I just have nothing but good things to say about Ehlers as an offensive talent. It's really just comes down to, will he get that deployment this year? I just don't want to be out on Ehlers because I do feel like one of these seasons he's absolutely going to make me pay if I am out on him. So Ehlers a guy that I can't quit quite yet. I'll see where he's going in my drafts. Hopefully I can get him at value, at least in one or two spots, and kind of sit with that. But definitely not a guy that I'm comfortable fading in any format just because of his potential to absolutely go off if given the opportunity. All right, statistic number 4 is Sonny Milano shot 30% across 49 games played. It was the first 30% shooting percentage season since 1987-88. This one's just for fun. Realistically, I don't think Sonny Milano is going to be doing anything that we're going to be interested in for fantasy. He'll be lucky to hang on to a third line role for Washington the entire year. But either way, it's definitely an oddity. Definitely a shocking statistic. When I looked at it, I had to double take that that was actually the correct number. I don't think that Milano is like this is some great indication that Milano is some tremendous shooting talent or anything like that. I just thought this one was kind of crazy. First time that somebody had shot 30% in this many games played. Obviously, he didn't play the entire season, 49 games played. It's not 82, but still a pretty solid sample size. First 30% shooting percentage season since 87, 88. Absolutely wild stuff. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Not everything has to have a massive fantasy implication. This one's kind of just more for fun. Statistic number 5 is Lucas Raymond shot 19.1% in 2023-24, following up seasons of 12.7 and 12.5%. So I have a few things here. Lucas Raymond um, could be just a player who's ascending, right? Could be a player who's on his way up in the league, and maybe he's kind of graduated his shot to a different level of dangerousness, and he's going to be a more highly efficient shooter moving forward. For next season, I do have him projected for 14%, so it's not like I'm regressing him right back down to the 12.5, 12.7% range that he was in his first 2 seasons in the league. But you have to think that this 19.1% is an outlier when we come back and look at all of his seasons in like 10 years. I can't believe that he's suddenly graduated to just being an absolute elite level shooting talent. So I have to bring him back down to earth somewhat, and that kind of takes him back down into a 60s point range. I have him for 24 goals and 63 points this season. I just can't get behind him reproducing that 19.1% shooting percentage. The on ice shooting percentage here was really huge for Raymond as well. Obviously, if you shoot 19%, you're probably going to have a pretty solid on ice shooting percentage as well. And so both of those numbers taking a step back is why I'm predicting him to regress this coming season. There are opportunities, I would say, where Raymond could exceed this. I have him for 18 minutes average time on ice. Could he exceed that? Definitely a possibility, but not one I'm super comfortable with. You know, they have the Brinket, they have Tarasenko who came in, they have Patrick Kane who doesn't look to be done just yet. So there's definitely ways that Raymond could exceed this by virtue of more time on ice. But they do have other wingers there that will probably hold him back from, just absolute like elite level usage, like 20 plus minutes a night kind of stuff. Don't think that's in the cards for this season. He's not a high end shooter. Like I have him projected for 170 shots. I don't think he's going to suddenly progress to be a 200 plus shots guy in the league. If he did, that would be another way for him to get there. But I don't see that coming. He's been fairly consistent through his first 3 years in the league in terms of his shot generation. So that's not something I see popping up all of a sudden in year 4. There's just not a lot that I'm super excited about with Raymond where I'm saying they're sure he had a 19% shooting percentage, but I'm seeing upward trends in other areas that I can kind of say at least I can project him to maybe continue on an upward trend for next year. I'm a little bit worried that we saw some a season that's closer to his ceiling for his career already with Lucas Raymond this past season. So the 19.1%, when you see something like that and you compare it to the seasons before, and there's such a big difference in between, over 6% compared to his career average before this season. That's just something you got to take into account, or else I think you're probably going to be burned more often than not. All right, statistic number 6 is Jakob Chychrun ranked 3rd amongst all defensemen behind only Cale Makar and Roman Josi in individual scoring chances for per 60. Now keep in mind here, Jakob Chychrun did not play on a top power play the way Cale Makar and Roman Josi did for much of the season. It's definitely a different offensive environment. Nashville was actually pretty good last year. Obviously, Makar playing in Colorado, we know that they can score goals. Ottawa was solid in terms of chance generation, but they weren't especially efficient in converting. Chychrun is just one of those guys who can generate these kind of scoring chances. I think that's pretty important as an attribute for a defenseman in predicting goal scoring and predicting shots, which is often a category that we're tracking or a category that brings us a lot of points for fantasy. Chychrun is, I think, honestly, a pretty special offensive talent. And unfortunately, he goes to Washington here, and they've got John Carlson, who I think they have a world of allegiance to. And I just can't see Carlson being unceremoniously dumped off the top power play. But I don't want to be off of Jakob Chychrun just because of this talent level that you see reflected in this number here. Whenever you're ranking this highly in a statistic where the next two guys around you are Kale McCarr and Roman Yossi, you're doing something right. You want to evaluate that and say, hey, I think I should be in on this player, even if the situation doesn't look too good. I want to evaluate where he's going, and if it's not too crazy, I would like to have that player, even if it feels a little bit rough throughout the season. Washington not going to be a terrific offensive situation by all measures next year. I think it's probably a downgrade in terms of the even strength offensive situation for Chychrun. But I think that this is a player that's good enough in terms of generating his own offense that I don't want to be caught fading him, similar to Ehlers in that respect, where I don't want to be caught fading him in a season where suddenly the pathway's paved. He gets on the top power play. Maybe Washington decides to run a two power play top unit. That's a possibility. I don't think it's the most likely one, but it's always a possibility. Either way, I expect Chychrun to get a lot of minutes at even strength for Washington, and a player of this talent level, I think, has a lot of opportunity where he could exceed the kind of baseline projection that I have for him. So I want to be in on Chychrun. As long as the price isn't too prohibitive, I want him to be one of these guys that I can have as maybe my fourth defenseman on a team. But if he actually gets the deployment, gets that top power play, then you might be looking at a massive fantasy season, and you might be just making a huge profit off a player like this. I want to be in on talent and take note of deployment, but also kind of stack the cards on my side in that way to have the players with the talent on my team, not just go with the guys that I'm projecting, in August that are going to maintain some sort of role all season long. A lot can happen throughout the course of an NHL season. I want to be in on talent. Statistic number 7 here. Darnell Nurse ranked 6th, and John Carlson ranked 7th amongst all defensemen in individual scoring chances for per 60 over the last 20 games of the regular season. So obviously, two different defensemen here have their own things going on. Let's start with Carlson, since we just talked about Chychrun. Carlson, I don't think is washed. This is one indication that you could use to say that he's not washed at this point. I don't think he is near like his elite levels anymore. I do think there's been some fall off, but this run of games towards the end of the season shows me a little bit is left in the tank, at least for Carlson. I do expect him to have a decent season next year, 55 points ish. That sounds about right for John Carlson in the current iteration of the Capitals, and I do expect him to hang on to that top power play for the full season. I don't want to make the mistake of just saying he had a bad season, he's dealt with some injuries, now I'm totally off him. Carlson, I think, will be faded in a fair number of drafts. I think people view him as old and on a not so great team, and they'll just not want to have anything to do with them. And I think that's a scenario in which you might want to have some Carlson this year. So, John Carlson, if he falls in your drafts, I would still be comfortable clicking that button on him. Darnell Nurse, I wanted to highlight him here because honestly, I think he's gotten a lot of bad rap. Through the playoffs, there were many, many cases where people were sharing highlights of him not making an optimal defensive play, shall we say, and it ending up in a goal against for the Edmonton Oilers. Still think this is a defenseman. He's absolutely locked in there with that salary. He's going to get a lot of minutes there. There's an offer sheet out currently for Philip Broberg. If Broberg's gone, then, they're really running thin on how many defensemen they can play in big minutes. And so I do expect Darnell Nurse to get a ton of minutes once again. I do think that it's still Edmonton, right? It's still going to be a team that scores an absolute ridiculous amount of goals, especially with the additions they've made. Skinner, we talked about, but Arvidsson as well. They brought back Adam Henrique. This is a team that's got as good of a top 9 as any across the league. Obviously, you have the stars McDavid and Draisaitl there, but they also have the complementary players now. think the offense in general is going to be really good. Nurse obviously shows out in any kind of bangers league, bangers heavy points, or bangers cats leagues. He's going to show out there, and I do think that there's some offensive potential. He could score 40 plus points while providing those elite bangers numbers, and I think everybody's going to be off him just because of all the narrative that went on around the player in the playoffs. So I don't want to be totally out on Darnell Nurse if he's slipping at all in drafts this year. Statistic number 8. These are the top 10 defensemen in 5v5 scoring chances for per 60. So on ice numbers here, not individual, but on ice numbers. And I just want to highlight some crazy names that come out of this. So number 1, Matthias Ekholm. Number 2, Evan Bouchard. Number 3, Mark Giordano. Number 4, Erik Carlson. Number 5, Jakub Slavin. Number 6, Samuel Girard. Number 7, Brent Burns. Number 8, Aaron Ekblad. Number 9, Gustav Forsling. Number 10, Ryan McDonough. So yeah, I think you probably got the gist just by me reading off these names. But basically, Evan Bouchard and Erik Carlson are the only names on this list that feel like they have any business being there, and the rest are just a bunch of dudes on good teams, right? Ekholm on the Oilers. You got Giordano, obviously, played for the Leafs in some sheltered minutes before eventually kind of just being washed and coming out of the lineup completely. Jakub Slavin and Brent Burns on Carolina. You got Samuel Girard showing out for Colorado. You got Ekblad and Forsling on Florida, and you got McDonough on that surprising team last year in Nashville. So, do I think that generally speaking, scoring chances for is a good metric to use to evaluate players? Yes, but I do want to highlight that for defensemen, especially when it's a forward-driven situation, the forwards are really good. You'll kind of get these guys pulled up, and that doesn't necessarily mean if you're looking at these advanced statistics, you might be tempted to think, oh man, like Aaron Ekblad and Gustav Forsling are both terrific offensive players. I should absolutely be in on these guys. If you're going to be in on those guys, I would say don't be in on them specifically for this metric. I think this is probably a metric for defensemen specifically, where it's probably a little bit more driven by the forwards that they're playing with, by the how good the team is that's playing in front of them. And so I don't want to be in a situation where I'm just overemphasizing basically their impact, because yeah, you look at this end of season list and there are some big names there, but by and large these are just guys who played on really good teams. All right, statistic number 9. Jacob Trouba got absolutely caved in last year. He had a 42.6% Corsi for percentage and a 43.1% scoring chance for percentage. Basically, as whenever he was on the ice, the Rangers were just getting absolutely destroyed in terms of shot attempts and dangerous shot attempts in the scoring chance column. And that's a really tough place to be for a guy who's the captain of this team, supposed to be obviously a huge part of this team overall. The Rangers were probably not as good as you might have thought in terms of these metrics as a team. At even strength, they're just 14th in the league in Corsi for percentage and 13th in scoring chance for percentage. So it's not like the Rangers were absolutely tremendous at even strength to begin with, but Trouba in particular just shows out so much worse than any of the other defensemen there. It really does look like Trouba specifically was a problem for the Rangers. Then you have these kind of crazy narratives this offseason. He was apparently asked to waive his no trade clause. He declined. They wanted to kind of be off of Jacob Trouba here. And so that really leaves me worried about him. Obviously, a player that you're really probably only interested in Bangers Cats leagues or Super Bangers heavy formats, but I am not going to be interested in Jacob Trouba. I think there's a chance that he gets absolutely just shunted down the lineup and pushed to the third pair, and they kind of push him out the door a little bit that way just by reducing his minutes more. They have some other defensemen there in New York that they could prioritize above him. They've got Braden Schneider, who kind of low key looks like a Jacob Trouba under the hood, a big time banger as well. Could Braden Schneider take another step this year? Young defenseman, play with Condre Miller on the second pair and eat a lot of those minutes and provide just as good, if not better, results as Trouba. That's at least a possibility, and so I'm not going to be interested in drafting Trouba. I know the bangs look terrific, but I'm pretty worried that his role might just completely go away this year, and they try to subtly push him out the door. Statistic number 10, Matt Boldy. You knew I had to fit Matt Boldy in here somehow. Matt Boldy ranks 6th in the league in Corsi for percentage and 3rd in scoring chance for percentage in 2023-24. Matt Boldy is just a player that shows out in all the metrics that look good to me, all the metrics that I'm interested in for fantasy purposes. He's just always going to show out there, and that's why I keep talking about him. I think that Boldy, as I said, I mentioned Boldy in the players who could hit 100 points for the first time in 2024-25. In that episode, I talked about Matt Boldy. That would be an absolute home run scenario for Matt Boldy. It's definitely not like a base projection where I'm expecting him to get to that number, but I do think that Boldy is one of these guys who can absolutely crush when given the opportunity. And I will say, towards the end of last year, he got more and more time with Kirill Kaprizov on the top line. If that's the status quo moving into next year, if Kaprizov and Boldy are a duo at even strength and on the power play all season long, then yeah, you could be looking at a really exciting scenario for a guy of this talent level. It's hard to remember, but Boldy is pretty young still. For such a young player to be doing all of this at this stage in his career is really good stuff. I still feel like there's another gear potentially for him. He's only 23 years old, and there could be another gear left for him beyond what he's been able to show. He had 69 points, nice in 75 games last year. This year, I've got him projected up to 83 points in 82 games, but I think there's even ceiling beyond that if things go right for him this year. I'm super excited about Matt Boldy, and I think you should be too. All right, we've made it to the end of the top 10 most shocking statistics from 2023-24, what they might mean for us for fantasy for this year. Which stat did you think was the craziest? Comment below, let us know what you're thinking. And let us know if you've got any others that you found were crazy when you've been doing your own research here. I'd love to talk more about it. Do want to let everybody know while they're listening here, if you haven't heard already, September 1st, the new tiers for the Apples and Genos Patreon will go live. Got a $2 a month tier here. That gets you access to the patron-only live shows that will be happening once a month. There will be some really good information in those shows. So if you want that once-a-month show, you can do that. The Apples tier at $8 a month is going to get you access to those live shows, but it's also going to give you access to the patron-only Discord channels, access to the Patron League to play against me. That's probably going to fill up right on September 1st, so you're going to want to be on that if you want to play against me this year. And it's also going to give you access to all my show notes for the shows that I do. Primarily, people want this for the waiver wire show, for checking out who my ad targets are for the week and also for the year. I do kind of long-term ad targets in there as well. And then also you're going to have access to player evaluation tools that previously I'd been using and kind of perfecting for myself. And this year I'm going to make them available to members of the Patreon. If you are a true Apples and Genos degenerate, you can get the Genos tier, $15 a month. Gets you all of those perks that I mentioned already. Plus, I will answer every single one of your questions, guaranteed. While you're here, check out the Discord, link in the description. We're doing best ball slow drafts. I created Mark Barber is doing the creation. I'm doing just the channel creation and the role creation in Discord, but we've got 35 best ball drafts up and running. We're going to get up to 36, I think, in the next day. We've been doing more than one a day, it feels like, to this point. So we're going to be absolutely crushing these best ball slow drafts all the way into September. And so if you want to get in on some of that, you should definitely join the Discord for that. like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, whatever you are able to do for the channel, wherever you're checking out this content. It would be awesome if you were able to do that. It would mean so much to me personally, but also it helps us grow the channel and get all this information out to as many people as possible. Well, that's all that I've got for this episode. Hopefully, it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, which is a terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band. They're there for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.